The arrival on Nebulon. The transport vessel Earthen Pride cut through Nebulon's amber atmosphere, its engines humming softly as it began its descent toward the planetary capital of Lumina. Jasmine Winters pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the observation window, watching as swirling clouds parted to reveal a landscape unlike anything she had ever seen on Earth. Massive crystal formations jutted from the ground like frozen fountains, catching the light of Nebulon's twin suns and fracturing it into 1,000 different colors. "First time off-world?" asked a voice beside her. Jasmine turned to find an older woman with silver hair smiling knowingly at her. "Is it that obvious?" "The wonder in your eyes gives it away," the woman replied. "I've made this trip 6 times now as part of the exchange program orientation team. The wonder never quite fades, but that first glimpse, nothing compares to it." Jasmine nodded, returning her gaze to the window. She had trained for this moment for 3 years, learning the Nebulite language, studying their customs, preparing herself physically and mentally for the different gravity and atmospheric composition. But nothing in her training had prepared her for the sheer beauty of it all. "We'll be landing in approximately 5 minutes, announced the ship's AI through overhead speakers. "Please secure all personal belongings and prepare for atmospheric turbulence." Jasmine took a deep breath, feeling a flutter of anxiety in her stomach. She was about to become one of only 50 humans living among the Nebulites as part of the Earth-Nebulon exchange program. For the next year, she would be immersed in their culture, working alongside them in their advanced botanical laboratories and living with a Nebulite host, her soon-to-be roommate. The ship shuddered slightly as it passed through a layer of denser atmosphere, then smoothed out as it approached the crystalline landing platform. Jasmine gathered her regulation duffel bag, which contained everything she was permitted to bring from Earth. It wasn't much, some clothes, personal care items, a few mementos, but the program had been clear that part of the immersion experience was adapting to Nebulite resources. As the ship settled onto the platform with a gentle thud, Jasmine felt her heart rate accelerate. This was it, no turning back now. The disembarkation process was efficient, if somewhat overwhelming. Nebulites moved with a fluid grace that made even the most athletic humans appear clumsy by comparison. Their skin ranged from deep purple to pale lavender, with intricate patterns that seemed to shift subtly in different lighting. Most stood a head taller than the average human, with elongated limbs and features that somehow managed to be both alien and hauntingly beautiful. A Nebulite official greeted each human arrival, checking their credentials and providing them with a small crystalline device that would serve as both translator and guide during their stay. When Jasmine's turn came, she was met by a Nebulite with skin the color of twilight and eyes that seemed to contain galaxies. "Jasmine Winters," the Nebulite said, their voice melodic and precise. "Botanical researcher from Earth University of Applied Sciences. Welcome to Nebulon. I am Veldria, coordinator for the exchange program." "Thank you," Jasmine replied, trying to replicate the slight bow that was customary in Nebulite greetings. "I'm honored to be here." Veldria's eyes sparkled, whether with amusement or approval Jasmine couldn't tell. "Your host, Thorn, awaits you in the reception hall. They have been briefed on your arrival and will escort you to your shared dwelling." Jasmine followed Veldria through gleaming corridors that seemed to be carved from a single massive crystal. Other Nebulites moved past them, occasionally casting curious glances her way, but never starring outright. Jasmine had been told that Nebulites considered direct starring to be intrusive, as many of their species possessed varying degrees of empathic ability. Making prolonged eye contact was seen as attempting to read someone without permission, a significant breach of privacy. The reception hall opened before them, a vast chamber with a domed ceiling that captured the light from outside and diffused it throughout the space. Several humans were already there, each standing with a Nebulite who Jasmine assumed were their assigned hosts. She scanned the room, wondering which one was Thorn. "There," Veldria said, gesturing toward a solitary figure standing near one of the crystal columns that supported the dome. Unlike most of the Nebulites in the room, who wore flowing garments in vibrant colors, this one was dressed in more subdued tones, a fitted tunic and pants in deep blue that almost matched their skin. Their posture was straight but not rigid, and there was something about their stillness that suggested deep contemplation. "Thorn," Veldria called, approaching the figure, "your Earth exchange partner has arrived." The Nebulite turned, and Jasmine felt an unexpected jolt as their eyes met hers. Thorne's eyes were unlike any she had seen so far, not the typical galaxy-speckled irises of most nebulites, but a clear, piercing silver that seemed to look right through her. "Welcome to Nebulan, Jasmine Winters," Thorne said, their voice deeper than Veldria's but with the same musical quality that all nebulites seemed to share. They performed the customary bow, which Jasmine returned. "I trust your journey was acceptable." "Yes, thank you," Jasmine replied, suddenly aware of how plain her human voice sounded in comparison. "It was my first interstellar trip, but everything went smoothly." Thorne nodded, then reached for her duffel bag. "May I? The gravity here is slightly different from Earth's. You may find certain weights more challenging until you acclimatize." "Oh, thank you." Jasmine handed over the bag, noting how effortlessly Thorne lifted it. "That's very considerate." "It is practical," Thorne replied simply. "Our dwelling is located in the eastern quadrant of Lumina. We will use the transport tubes to reach it. Are you familiar with them from your preparatory studies?" "In theory," Jasmine said, "though I've never actually used one." "They are quite efficient," Thorne said, and Jasmine thought she detected a hint of pride in their voice. "Follow me." As they left the reception hall, Jasmine found herself studying Thorne more closely. The nebulite moved with the same fluid grace as the others, but there was a measured quality to their movements, as if each one was carefully considered before execution. Their skin was a deeper shade of purple than most, almost indigo, and the patterns that shifted across it were more subtle, geometric rather than the flowing, organic designs she had observed on others. The transport tubes turned out to be exactly what their name suggested, crystalline tubes that ran throughout the city, carrying individual pods at remarkable speeds. Jasmine watched in fascination as Thorne programmed their destination into a control panel, causing a two-person pod to materialize before them. "It's a form of matter transmission," Thorne explained, nodding her interest. "Not true teleportation, but a reconfiguration of existing particles into the necessary form. The technology is still being refined." "It's incredible," Jasmine said as they stepped into the pod. "On Earth, we're still using wheeled vehicles for most city transport." "I have studied Earth's technological development," Thorne replied. "Your species progresses quickly, if somewhat chaotically." Before Jasmine could respond to this assessment, the pod sealed around them and shot into the tube system. The sensation was strange but not unpleasant, a slight pressure followed by the feeling of gliding smoothly through space. Outside the transparent walls of the pod, Lumina streaked by in a blur of crystal, light, and color. In less than a minute, they had arrived at their destination. The pod opened seamlessly, and Thorne led Jasmine into what appeared to be a residential district. The buildings here were smaller than the grand structures of the city center, but no less beautiful, each one seemingly grown rather than built, with living plants integrated into their crystal facades. "This is our dwelling," Thorne said, stopping before a structure that glowed with a soft blue light. "It has been adapted to accommodate human physiological needs while maintaining nebulite aesthetic and functional standards." The interior was spacious and open, with few traditional walls. Instead, different areas were defined by subtle changes in lighting and the arrangement of furnishings. The ceiling was transparent, offering a view of Nebulan's amber sky, now deepening to copper as evening approached. "Your sleeping chamber is here," Thorne said, leading her to an alcove separated from the main living space by a curtain of what looked like liquid crystal. Inside was a bed, not quite like an Earth bed, but close enough, and several empty storage units built into the walls. "You may arrange your possessions as you wish. The environmental controls have been calibrated to human comfort levels." "Thank you," Jasmine said, setting down the few items she had carried herself. "It's beautiful." Thorne inclined their heads slightly. "I will prepare the evening meal while you settle in. Our schedule tomorrow includes an orientation at the botanical laboratories where you will be working. The first meal is at sunrise." With that, Thorne turned and moved toward another area of the dwelling, leaving Jasmine alone to unpack. As she arranged her few belongings in the storage units, she found herself wondering about her mysterious host. Thorne seemed different from the other nebulites she had encountered so far, more reserved, perhaps, or simply more formal. The orientation materials had mentioned that nebulites were a diverse species with varying cultural practices and individual temperaments, just like humans. They valued harmony, intellectual pursuit, and emotional clarity, but beyond these broad traits, they were as varied as any human population. Jasmine reminded herself not to make assumptions based on limited interaction. After unpacking, she ventured back into the main living area to find Thorn arranging food on a low table. The meal consisted of what appeared to be various fruits and vegetables, some recognizable from the Earth-compatible foods she had studied, others entirely alien. "I hope this selection is suitable," Thorn said. "Your dietary requirements were included in your file, but preferences can be more difficult to anticipate." "This looks wonderful," Jasmine assured them, taking a seat on one of the cushions arranged around the table. "I'm looking forward to trying Nebulite cuisine." As they ate, Jasmine attempted to engage Thorn in conversation, asking about their work, environmental engineering, specifically focusing on crystal growth applications. Their family, a small unit consisting of 3 genetic contributors rather than the human standard of 2, and their previous experiences with humans, limited to professional contexts. Jasmine was their first human roommate. Thorn answered each question politely, but didn't elaborate beyond what was directly asked. They seemed particularly interested, however, when Jasmine mentioned her specialization in adapting Earth plants to alien environments. "That is a valuable skill," Thorn said, their silver eyes focusing on her with new intensity. "Especially now that trade between our worlds is increasing. The botanical laboratories where you will be working are currently developing methods to grow nebulite crystal plants in Earth soil. Your expertise may prove useful." "I hope so," Jasmine replied, pleased to have found a topic that engaged her reserved host. "I've read about crystal plants but never seen one up close. Are they actually part crystal, or is that just a descriptive term?" For the first time, something like enthusiasm animated Thorn's features. "It is more than descriptive. The plants have evolved to incorporate crystalline structures into their cellular makeup. They photosynthesize but also absorb and channel energy through their crystal components. They are unique in the known galaxy." As Thorn spoke about the plants, Jasmine noticed their skin patterns shifting more actively, the geometric designs flowing into new configurations. She recalled reading that nebulite skin patterns could reflect emotional states, though interpreting them was considered an intimate skill usually reserved for close relationships. The conversation continued more naturally after that, centered around their shared scientific interests. By the time they finished eating, Jasmine felt like she had at least begun to establish a rapport with her alien roommate. Still, as she retired to her sleeping chamber that night, looking up through the transparent ceiling at Nebulin's 3 moons, she couldn't help but wonder what lay beneath Thorn's reserved exterior. Little did she know that in just a few days, an unexpected encounter would reveal far more than either of them had bargained for, changing the course of their relationship in ways neither could have anticipated. Jasmine's first 3 days on Nebulin passed in a blur of orientation sessions, laboratory tour, and information overload. The botanical research facility where she would be working was a marvel of science and art combined, a vast crystalline dome housing thousands of plant species from dozens of worlds, all thriving under the carefully calibrated light of Nebulin's twin suns. Her colleagues were welcoming, if somewhat reserved. Most Nebulites approached her with polite curiosity, asking questions about Earth's ecosystems and her research experience. A few seemed genuinely excited to work with her, particularly a vibrant young researcher named Pella, whose lavender skin patterns rippled enthusiastically whenever Jasmine shared insights from her work on Earth. "Your adaptation techniques could revolutionize our cross-planetary cultivation efforts," Pella had exclaimed during their tour of the xenobotany section. "We've been struggling with the molecular resonance issues in Earth soil for cycles." Throughout it all, Jasmine found herself returning each evening to the quiet sanctuary of the dwelling she shared with Thorn. Their routine had quickly established itself. Thorn typically arrived home before her and prepared their evening meal, which they shared while discussing their respective days. The conversations remained largely professional, though Jasmine noticed that Thorn seemed increasingly comfortable in her presence, occasionally offering small insights into nebulite culture that weren't covered in her orientation materials. On the morning of her 4th day, Jasmine woke earlier than usual. The first hints of dawn were just beginning to filter through the transparent ceiling of her sleeping chamber, painting the room in soft amber light. She lay still for a moment, listening to the gentle hum of lumina waking around her, the distant musical tones of the transport tubes activating, the soft chiming that seemed to emanate from the crystal buildings themselves. Stretching, she decided to take advantage of the early hour to use the cleansing chamber before Thorn awoke. The nebulite equivalent of a shower was one of the most luxurious experiences Jasmine had encountered so far. A chamber where water and light combined in a process that not only cleansed the body, but seemed to rejuvenate it on a cellular level. She slipped quietly from her sleeping area, grabbing her personal cleansing supplies and a change of clothes. The main living area was still dim, illuminated only by the ambient glow of the crystal walls. Thorn's sleeping chamber on the opposite side remained sealed, its privacy barrier opaque. Good, Jasmine thought. She didn't want to disturb her roommate's rest. The cleansing chamber was located in a small alcove adjacent to the main living space. Unlike on Earth, nebulite dwellings rarely had doors. Privacy was instead maintained through crystalline barriers that could be made opaque or transparent according to preference. Jasmine had quickly learned to activate these barriers, a simple matter of touching the control panel and selecting the desired setting. This morning, however, something was different. As she approached the cleansing chamber, she noticed that the control panel was emitting a faint blue pulse rather than its usual steady glow. Unfamiliar with this indicator, Jasmine hesitated, then reasoned it must be some kind of standby mode. She pressed her palm to the panel as usual. The barrier dissolved, revealing Thorn standing in the center of the cleansing chamber, completely unclothed. Time seemed to freeze. Jasmine stood transfixed, her brain struggling to process what she was seeing. Thorn's indigo skin gleamed under the gentle light of the chamber, the geometric patterns flowing across their body in a mesmerizing dance. Without their usual tunic and pants, Jasmine could see that these patterns extended across their entire form, becoming more intricate around the shoulders, chest, and what appeared to be sensitive areas that, while not identical to human anatomy, served similar enough functions to make Jasmine's cheeks burn with sudden embarrassment. Thorn had been in the process of adjusting the light settings and had their back partially turned toward the entrance. At the sound of the barrier dissolving, they turned sharply, silver eyes widening as they locked with Jasmine's. For a heartbeat, neither moved, then several things happened at once. Jasmine dropped her supplies, items clattering to the floor as she stumbled backward. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, raising her hands to cover her eyes. "The panel, I didn't know, I thought it was empty." At the same moment, a strange phenomenon occurred. The patterns on Thorn's skin, which had been flowing in gentle, regular sequences, suddenly accelerated, racing across their body in pulsing waves of deeper blue, almost electric in their intensity. More startling still, the air around Thorn seemed to shimmer, as if the very atmosphere was responding to some kind of energy emanating from their body. "Jasmine," Thorn said, their normally measured voice pitched slightly higher. "Please wait." But Jasmine was already retreating, mortified by her intrusion. "I'll wait. Take your time. I'm so sorry," she stammered, backing out of the doorway and frantically searching for the control to reactivate the barrier. Finding it, she slapped her palm against it, and the crystalline surface immediately rematerialized, turning opaque. Heart-pounding, Jasmine leaned against the wall opposite the cleansing chamber, trying to collect herself. Of all the cultural missteps she had feared making, walking in on her nebulite roommate in a state of undress hadn't even made the list. Was this a serious breach of protocol? Would Thorn be deeply offended? Should she request a different housing assignment? She was still deliberating these questions when the barrier dissolved again, and Thorn emerged. They were now dressed in their usual attire, though they had chosen a darker shade of blue than usual. Their skin patterns had slowed, but still moved more rapidly than Jasmine had ever observed, concentrating around their face and neck in a way that made her wonder if nebulites could blush. "I apologize for the confusion," Thorn said, their voice carefully controlled. "The pulsing blue light indicates that the chamber is occupied. I should have explained this during your orientation to the dwelling." "No, I'm the one who should apologize," Jasmine insisted. "I should have realized what it meant. I completely invaded your privacy." Thorn was silent for a moment, their silver eyes studying her with an intensity that made Jasmine acutely conscious of her own embarrassment. Then, to her surprise, they said, "Among my people to be seen unclothed is significant." "I understand," Jasmine said quickly. "On Earth, too, it's very private. I promise it won't happen again." "You misunderstand," Thorn said softly. "It is not merely a matter of privacy. For nebulites, our bodies, particularly the patterns that flow across our skin, reveal our emotional states in ways we cannot conceal when unclothed. To be seen in such a state is to be emotionally exposed, not just physically. It is a vulnerability we share only with our closest bonds. Jasmine felt her embarrassment deepen. That makes what I did even worse. I'm truly sorry, Thorn. Thorn tilted their head slightly, the patterns around their necks still shifting rapidly. What is curious to me is what you felt when you saw me. The question caught Jasmine off guard. What I felt. Yes, Thorn said. Most nebulites are empathic to some degree, as you may know from your studies. I am more sensitive than most, able to perceive emotional energies quite clearly. When you saw me, there was surprise, of course, and embarrassment. But there was something else. Something I have not often encountered in humans. Jasmine swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry. What had she felt in that moment? Shock, certainly. Embarrassment, absolutely. But she couldn't deny there had been something else, a flutter in her stomach, a quickening of her pulse that wasn't entirely due to the awkwardness of the situation. I don't know what you mean, she managed, though she suspected her own physiological responses were betraying her. Thorn stepped closer, closing the distance between them until only a few inches separated them. I believe you do, they said, their voice lower now. Humans often deny their emotional responses, particularly those related to attraction. Nebulites do not have this inhibition. Attraction, was that what she had felt? Jasmine couldn't deny that she found Thorn fascinating, even beautiful in their alien way, but she hadn't consciously considered attraction. Yet now, with Thorn standing so close, their silver eyes searching hers, she couldn't dismiss the possibility. I don't know what's appropriate here, she admitted. I'm still learning your customs, and I don't want to make more mistakes. Among my people, Thorn said slowly, when two individuals experience mutual attraction, they typically engage in a period of emotional exploration, sharing their energy fields, learning each other's emotional patterns. It is a precursor to deeper bonds. The implication hung in the air between them. Was Thorn suggesting that they had felt something too? That the strange energy she had seen around them in the cleansing chamber had been their reaction to her? And what happens during this emotional exploration? Jasmine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Something like a smile touched Thorn's lips, perhaps the first true smile Jasmine had seen from them. It begins with this, they said, slowly extending their hand, palm up, toward her. Jasmine looked down at the offered hand, then back up at Thorn's face. The patterns on their skin had slowed now, flowing in more deliberate waves that seemed to pulse in time with their breathing. With a courage she didn't know she possessed, Jasmine placed her palm against Thorn's. The contact was electric. A warm, tingling sensation spread from her palm up her arm, not unpleasant but definitely foreign, as if the energy she had seen around Thorn was now flowing into her through their connected hands. She gasped softly, instinctively wanting to pull away, but Thorn's fingers gently curled around hers. This is my emotional field interacting with yours, Thorn explained, their voice gentle. What you are feeling is the resonance between us. It is uncommonly strong for an interspecies connection. The sensation was intensifying, spreading through Jasmine's body like warm honey, making her skin hypersensitive and her heart race. Along with it came emotions that didn't feel entirely her own, curiosity, wonder, and something deeper, more primal that made her breath catch. Is this normal? She asked, her voice unsteady. No, Thorn said simply. This is exceptional. I have never experienced such clear resonance with any being, nebulite or otherwise. Their eyes, those piercing silver pools, seemed to draw her in. Jasmine felt as if she were standing on the edge of something vast and unknown, terrifying in its enormity but enticing in its promise. If she took this step, there would be no going back. Whatever lay between her and Thorn would be changed forever. What does it mean? She whispered. Thorn's free hand came up to brush a strand of hair from her face, the touch sending another cascade of sensation through her. It means, they said softly, that what began as a simple cultural misunderstanding may have revealed something far more significant, something neither of us was looking for. Jasmine closed her eyes, focusing on the feelings flowing between them. There was no deception here, no ambiguity, just pure emotion, raw and honest in a way human interaction rarely achieved. It was frightening in its intensity, but also liberating. I want to understand, she said, opening her eyes to meet Thorn's gaze. I want to learn what this is between us. The patterns on Thorn's visible skin accelerated again, but in a different pattern than before, more harmonic, less chaotic. Then we will learn together, they said. But slowly. There is much about each other's biology, culture, and emotions that we must understand first. They gently disengaged their hand from hers, and Jasmine felt the absence of the connection like a physical loss. The sensation had been so overwhelming, so all-encompassing, that its withdrawal left her feeling strangely hollow. Tonight, Thorn said, taking a step back, after your work at the laboratory is complete, we will begin proper emotional exploration. For now, you should use the cleansing chamber and prepare for your day. Their mouth curved in what was definitely a smile this time. And I will ensure the occupancy indicator is clearly explained to you to avoid further revelations. With that, they turned and moved toward the dwelling's exit, presumably to head to their own work. At the threshold, they paused and looked back at Jasmine, who still stood somewhat dazed by the cleansing chamber entrance. Jasmine, they said, their voice carrying a new warmth, what happened this morning, it is considered an intimate beginning among my people. A fortunate accident, perhaps, but not one to regret. Then they were gone, leaving Jasmine to contemplate how thoroughly her expectations for her year on Nebulon had just been upended. What had begun as a mortifying cultural misunderstanding had somehow transformed into the first step of what promised to be a profound connection, one that crossed the boundaries of species, culture, and perhaps even conventional understanding of relationship. As she finally entered the cleansing chamber, carefully checking the control panel first, Jasmine couldn't help but smile. Of all the discoveries she had hoped to make on Nebulon, this was one she had never anticipated, but it might prove to be the most significant of all. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.